We used to be the original palm readers. You know, you can say it, splinter hemorrhages. If somebody has splinter hemorrhages, guess what? There's something wrong with their heart. If they have bruising, unintentional bruising, something can be wrong with their hematology. Now, some really cool research is showing that there could be these zombie cells that live on our skin that can actually get into your lungs and heart. So it's a bi-directional street, and it's a very much a living organ.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Dr. Sajic, welcome to the Home of Healthspan podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a while. And before we get into why I've been looking forward to it, how would you describe yourself?
I describe myself as a curious researcher, father, builder, who loves turning deep learning ideas into meaningful impact and conversations. And everything I do is centered about growth, purpose, and the desire to leave a lasting impact and really change the world for the better.
Fantastic. Yeah. And we'll talk about all you've done to date and are doing to do exactly that. You know, I grew up in a household with a pediatric cardiologist and a pediatric hematologist, where there was always a fight of what's more important, the heart or the blood, right? Going back and forth. But today we're talking about our largest organ, our skin. And I think there is a misconception with a lot of people of, oh, that's vanity, where no, I mean, it is a marker of health. People who look younger are healthier, and it's hard to tell direction. But as someone who goes deep into the science of longevity, as well as into the science of skin and dermatology, what do you see as that connection there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love that you said your parents were both, hematology, cardiology. I always tell my patients, I'm like, listen, skin always loses. And for one main reason, I'm like, yes, it's the biggest organ, but two, we can almost always fix your skin, whereas with the heart, it's hard. Sometimes the damage is permanent. Whereas with the skin, we can generally fix it. We used to think that with sun damage, that's irreversible. We call it a permanent chemical, permanent damage. But some cool research has really come out showing that even that's not true. I love that you're also saying that people think of it as a vanity organ. When when you go to the gym, nobody questions it. Nobody says like, oh, you're just trying to look vain and have big muscles. They know there's also a big health component. But whereas with the skin, we don't have that. People just assume, many people assume that if you want to take care of your skin, that you're just vain. And there's some really amazing research showing that the opposite is actually true, that the signal not only can tell us about your internals. We used to be the original palm readers, and you can say it, splinter hemorrhages. If somebody has splinter hemorrhages, guess what? There's something wrong with their heart. If they have bruising, unintentional bruising, something can be wrong with their hematology. So that was the original. We used to think it was a one-way mirror, but now some really cool research is showing that there could be these zombie cells that live on our skin that can actually get into your lungs and heart. So it's a bi-directional street, and it's a very much a living organ. And treating your skin properly, not just surface, there's a lot of products that are very, very surface-oriented, but actually truly healing your skin can actually also impact your longevity.
Okay, and that's what I'm really excited to dive into. So I think some of our listeners know I've had multiple malignant melanoma, aggressive. I was a distance open water swimmer, lots of time outside. And there seems to be some disagreement on, is it sun exposure? Is it other things causing this damage? And even my parents kind of debate and go back and forth on what's in. My mom's had her own skin cancer issues. Where does that come out? Because on one side, the research I've seen, it says, hey, of all the things you can do, the one that is unequivocal is sunscreen is going to help protect your skin. Like that's the one thing that has been true. But are we risking something on vitamin D on the other side of that?
I love that you asked that. So the jury's still sort of out. There is a study that just came out. There's all the studies up until now suggest that sunscreen on itself is not enough to stop vitamin D production. Okay. There was a study that just came out recently, sort of said the opposite and said, no. All of those previous studies were SPF 15. We wanted to see if it's SPF 30. What ends up happening? And their argument was that, yes, it can slow down production, but there were design flaws in that study. So that's always the issue. When you talk on Instagram, TikTok, all of that stuff, it's very surface level. So it's like reading the article in the news. It's like, the Mars is falling on Earth. You're like, oh my God, we got to go in bunkers when Mars is falling on top of us. And then you find out, no, Mars is like moving 1 millimeter closer to Earth every, 200 years, so that in a billion years, Mars will hit Earth, So you're like, oh, like that doesn't make a difference to me. Right. So that's the issue. People read the headlines, and the way news information is designed is you gotta sort of grab them in a second. So if I tell you, like, listen, Andrew, like, it doesn't really make a difference, you're not gonna tune in. But if I say vitamin D could be impacted by your sunscreen and your doctor is lying to you, you're going to listen, you know what I mean? And then I'll say, well, no, actually, if we look at the study, and you might tune out. So the study that I was talking about showed that it was a 5 nanomole difference, per liter with the sunscreen versus without. And if you look at it, the baseline is 50 nanomole per liter. So it's at best a 10% reduction. And if you look at the study population that they looked at, most of them were actually already like very close to being vitamin D deficient. That's the main thing. In our society right now, I'm seeing at least 30% of people are vitamin D deficient. When they come, we also run a testosterone clinic, male health, overall HRT, even women's health. People come in, I want testosterone, I want estrogen, I want progesterone. I'm like, let's check your vitamin D levels first. And 30%, a third, are deficient in it. So can sunscreen impact it? Yes, I think at best is maybe 5-10%. So it doesn't really, the biology doesn't, like if you see yourself getting a little bit of a tan, that is vitamin D production right then and there. So if you're wearing sunscreen, generally we think outdoor exposure, here, arms, 15 minutes in midday sun, that's enough, even if you have sunscreen or not. If you're wearing sunscreen, increase it to 17 minutes and you're good.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask for the practical. So for skin health, probably still put on the sunscreen, just get a little more time in the sun. Like take a 20-minute walk after lunch and you'll probably be good.
You got it. And that's the thing. I think we are shifting. We used to say absolutely zero sun, like especially someone like you, if you've had melanoma, I'm like zero sun. And to go back to your question, is it the only cause? We are finding out now it's like most things in life, it's multifactorial. There's no one thing. One of the analogies I used to say is like, for guys, they say, if you're watching sports, I could give you the best goalie in the world. If you don't have other players on the field, it doesn't matter, you're going to lose, right? So your sunscreen really is the goalie. If you don't have a goalie, you could have the best strikers, the best defenders. You're going to lose pretty much every game. For women, I usually say, because, not as many watch sports. I mean, if they watch sports, it's easy analogy. What I say is if you go to for example, the opera, what made the opera special? Was it the singers? Was it the dancers? Was it the orchestra? Was it the environment? It's all of it, So it's really all about, for me, I hate looking into like what individual thing is. It's all about stacking the right environment for you. And the reason I say that is we are finding that complete avoidance of the sun goes beyond vitamin D. It's not just vitamin D. It's nitric oxide, it's endorphins, it's, synthesizing your diurnal stuff. People who are not exposed at all in the sun are actually having much higher rates of cancers. They're having higher rates of heart disease and higher rates of depression. That's why we call it seasonal affective disorder, SAD. In the winter, things go awry, right? So we need some sun, but it needs to be, not high UV index. You do need to wear your sunscreen. We are getting in an era where you can actually track these things. There's new technologies that we can track the health of your mitochondrial DNA on your skin. We can test the oxidant, pro-oxidant level with something called the PaOT test. Mm-hmm. So there are ways for us to sort of more safely say, okay, what is your risk? How do we mitigate that risk?
Yeah, and I mean, a couple of things on that. One of the reasons my father and others had just been skeptical, it's all sun damage, is the amount of malignant melanoma you see in between toes or on your bottom, on parts of the skin that aren't in the sun. A prior podcast guest, unfortunately, this was a conversation after we stopped recording, who had his own cancer and everything. He said, they'd found marathon runners had higher than normal melanomas. And so they assumed, it's because they're out in the sun too much. And then they held that controlled, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the time in the sun. It was lack of blood flow to the skin, which I think makes it more susceptible maybe to those damaged cells reproducing, doing other things. I said, okay, well, that's actually really interesting because, I would swim 25-kilometer races, which is back-to-back marathons. And no matter if I'm in Bermuda in the summer when it's 1,000,000,000 degrees, by the end of my swim, I'm cold because all the blood flow is going to my organs. And my parents would comment on, wow, you were white as a sheet after a race because all your blood flow is going in. And I said, well, if it is that, that makes a lot of sense why I got this, because there have been many, many times in my life, almost each week, where I'm doing that to my body. And so, as you said, it's no single thing, but there are all these things at play.
I absolutely agree with that. So whether it's blood flow or not, I mean, you also want to look at one study if it's repeatable. So sometimes you can get these things, we call it, there was a Harvard study where it showed, like, I forget which zodiac sign, but let's say Capricorns were much more likely to get bowel perforation. They were 200 times more likely to get bowel perforation, right? It ended up being that if you test, so statistical significance, the N95, like 0.005, 95% confidence intervals, that means 1 in 20. But if you look at 20 random things, completely random, you're going to find one that's statistically significant. So that's why I'm like, we need to repeat these studies.
Yeah.
But I do agree, there are other things we're seeing. Like, there are evidence, mostly in mice, but there are some emerging studies that diet plays a huge role. So again, is it the blood flow? Is it that you're running out and you don't have enough fuel to fuel these things? But really for melanoma, especially somebody that's had repeated melanoma like you, I would say genetics. Genetics is the biggest driver of anything. And it goes back to that validation component where if you got this, I don't know if you've had yourself checked out.
Oh, I do every 3 months. Yeah.
Genetics is think of it like height. If like Shaquille O'Neal, basketball player, 7 feet tall, he could have eaten popcorn, desserts, and whatever, and he might have not gotten 7 feet, but he would have still been 6'5", so that's, where you get 2-3 inches, and it's same for melanoma. If you have a gene mutation that's driving this, you're going to be at an increased risk. Now, the goal is, well, how do we minimize that risk while still keeping you? Because, if you stop swimming, you're probably going to go into depression. This is you. So one, sunscreen, yes, there can be on the toes. Again, that's more likely. Could it be vascular? Maybe. Could it be genetics? Maybe, but it's all a combination of things. And the sun is just yet another. We know it causes that DNA damage. So if you already have damaged DNA, we want to reduce that risk as much as possible. Like, we know from tanning beds, one session, now the newest data, we used to think it was like 40, 50%. Now it's like 200% increase, right?
With a single session.
Single session increases, right? So that's kind of the data that we're looking at. Does it mean, never do it? No, but you have, like, for the tanning beds, no, never, right? Sunscreen, same thing. If for you, that's the single best protection you can do is sunscreen, right? The problem is not, like, people always look for problems. It goes back to that issue of, like, they want to be heard. They want to be the experts. Like, everybody's now an expert on Instagram. I'm like, one, look at their credentials. Like, why is a chiropractor talking about putting sun in weird places? Like, it's a trend. They're like, oh, expose this part of your body to the sun. I'm like, what's your credentials, man? What is going on? And then they always go back to the toxicity. Sunscreen is toxic. They're giving you this toxic stuff. Look, there's this one study that showed it in a petri dish. I'm like, well, how does that apply to humans? Like,
humans, yeah.
Anyway, but it's sad, and there's so much misinformation, and because people are vain, it's what you show to the world. It does tend to resonate a lot when people are talking about the skin and spreading misinformation.
So you started off talking about there are things we can do for the skin, not just the surface level, but truly caring for it, taking care of it. And we started with sunscreen, but what are some of these other things that you recommend do with your patients and your clinic?
So some of the best data right now is laser treatments on highly exposed areas. So neck, face, we know now CO2 laser. There was a study, randomized control trial, first of its kind. We had tons of studies even before that. Dr. Fitzpatrick and his group in 2007 showed that ablative laser, retrospectively looking at patients, 90% reduction in skin cancer when compared to matched controls. Study in 2021 out of Dayton, Ohio, showed that fractional laser, forearms, over 3 years, those that were treated also had a 90% reduction. This was a randomized controlled trial, so a landmark study. We've replicated that, and we just published in Brazil. We had a med student present this data. Facial skin, we needed 3 sessions. After 1 session, we couldn't quite achieve 90, and it goes back to your blood vessels. So I do think there's something there, So Facial skin, we needed 3 sessions to achieve that 90% rate over 3 years. So it wasn't enough with one, and we needed to go deeper as well.
Is it every 12 months? So when you say 3 sessions, what was the frequency over that 3-year period?
We generally do it every month. So we do it, we can stack it sort of thing. We did it every month, every 4 to 6 weeks. And then after those 3 sessions, we were able to reduce future pre-cancer skin cancer by 90%.
Could you give us a bit of a primer on the different kinds of lasers? Because there's Halo and Moxie and BBL and yeah.
Yeah, so there's, first of all, we call them ablative versus non-ablative lasers, right? So ablative just means if we look at the skin, so this is your top layer, this is your bottom layer, it leaves this top layer intact and really does all the damage here. And it really is, everything with laser is some type of damage. It's controlled damage, but we're targeting a certain sort of what we call a chromophore. So what does the laser see? So some really cool studies show, like for example, if you go and you look at white balloon versus red balloon, and you fire a laser, the white balloon does not get damaged, the red one will. You know why? Because it's detecting that red. So certain lasers like pulse dye laser, XLV, evolution light, there's many, but really what they're targeting is the peaks where the red is it's at the highest, so 1064, 595, 755 to a lower extent, but those target the reds, right? So that when people are going after red spots, that's the laser, and that's a non-ablative full beam laser, okay? The ones you were talking about are more, and those lasers, the ones I just talked about, there's no real data that they do anything for like health of the skin. They might maybe build a little bit of collagen, a smattering, but they don't do anything for true skin cancer prevention. Now, things like long pulse 10 diag laser can, because basal cells specifically have a lot of blood vessels in them. So if you starve those blood vessels and you get rid of those blood vessels, you can actually cure basal cell to a certain extent there, right? It's not the first thing we go to. We generally go to surgery, but it can cure basal cells, but it doesn't do preventative. Now, we're going to what you said, Moxie, Fraxel. We have basically, those are fractionated lasers. So if you think of, and they target basically tissue. They target tissue, water. They target water. So the water in the tissue, they target and they evaporate the water. By evaporating the water, they create a column of damage in the tissue. So they superheat the water and then it creates that channel. So full beam lasers, we used to have ablative, fully ablative. You hear about that fully ablative CO2 laser. Means it just like if you have your pointer, and you see the laser, it just everything in its path. It's what people typically think of when they think of a laser. It cuts a hole through a wall, right? Yeah. That's direct beam, doesn't split the beam. And I talk about it, that's like power washing your driveway. It's full beam of water. Fractional laser, we figured out, is if we put a type of shower head on it where we can split that beam. And so we go from like a fist to like this, where it looks like a shower head.
Yeah.
Much less damage, much less pain. We can achieve similar results and much, much faster recovery. So then you have that split beam, fractionated. That's where it says fractionated, because we fractionated that beam and created a shower head. We have non-ablative stuff where it bypasses the top layer of the skin, goes down on the bottom. That's things like Fraxel, Moxie, that don't damage the surface layer of the skin. Then we have, on the other end, erbium YAG and CO2 that actually do the full column. So they damage the top part, they damage the bottom part, and that's why they're ablative, because they're damaging the top part as well, not just the bottom. Now, why that's important for patients is especially if you want true skin health, you want to do that preventative, you want to decrease the future risk potentially of skin cancer. Fraxel, the best data suggests that it too can do it, but about a 50% reduction over 18 months. Ablative fractional lasers, 90% over 2 to 3 years, right? So something about that damage on the top layer as well seems to be very important physiologically as well.
Okay, that's really helpful.
And then the last part is the depth. So there's really cool, exciting research. There's something called chemotherapy cream. It's also trending on Instagram, chemo cream, and they look like they've had laser, but it lasts much longer, about 6 weeks. You look like raw hamburger meat. The question was, well, how come this doesn't really prevent skin cancer? It does it temporarily. Like you'll get a reduction for about 6 months to a year, and then it all comes back. We're like, why? I wiped the field. We call it literally field therapy. We treated the whole area. We're treating even the ones we don't see. Why does it come back? We just found out, there's a group that found out there's a second hibernating focus in the actual dermis, that bottom layer. Remember when I said there's 2 layers? So FUDX targets this, gets that damage. There's a second layer here that actually sends these zombie senescence associated secretory proteins and peptides phenotype that actually starts remutating. And they saw the mutation started happening right above that. So these collection of zombie cells start impacting the epidermal cells right on top. The main difference, and this is what our research found out that we published in Brazil, we need higher energy. So 40, we need to go to around 400 to 600 micron depths to really eliminate that focus. And it matches the studies from Queensland, Australia, where they also saw that we can actually decrease mutation load, but it was dependent on getting to that about 600 micron depth.
Most corporate wellness programs overwhelm employees with too much, or they offer too little to be useful. Alively gets it right. We start with each employee's data and goals, then serve one clear, personalized action at a time. No noise, just real behavioral change. The outcome? A healthier, happier workforce and measurable impact for your business. Visit alively.com to see personalized wellness in action.
You just, in a totally different context, but just mentioned a buzzword that I think a lot of people are going to be curious about, the peptides. And so I'm curious on peptides, or even like rapamycin, some other less known treatments people can do, right? GHKCU, other things when you start talking about skin health. What are you seeing in that? Even if, look, the research hasn't caught up yet, but we're seeing it clinically or anecdotally, and maybe there's promise here.
Mm-hmm. So I'll start with the skin peptide, GHKCU, copper tripeptide, right? So we've known about this for like 20 years on the skin. It helps with wounds. It's great. We have it like, I think it's a great peptide. I use it. We formulate, we make our own products. It's in a lot of my products. What we don't know is the latest stuff where people are sort of just injecting it into themselves, right? We just don't know. And you have all these people like, look at my skin before, look at my skin after, and then the lighting's all different. I'm like, you got to have standardized photography. Like, I don't know if you airbrush this. I don't know what's happening there, right? You know, and people kind of go like saying like, well, it's a naturally occurring peptide, so I'm just going to inject it. Well, you know, what else is a naturally occurring peptide? Insulin.
Arsenic, hemlock. Like, there are a lot of naturally occurring substances you don't want to consume.
You know, like growth hormone, testosterone is natural. You know what I mean? I'm like, we know all kinds of stuff. So problem is, you know, one, we don't know any short-term stuff. People are sort of saying like, well, I'm not seeing any issues. I'd love to see registries, like, you know, where people are, it's HIPAA compliant. There's no judgment. There's not going to be any government kind of coming in and arresting you. Like, I'd love to see physicians create this where it's a registry where people can come in. And so if I look at it like smoking, like we've been talking about smoking for the last like 100 years, like don't smoke, it increases lung cancer. Guess what? The rates of smoking are still like 20, 30%. There's a subset of people that are just like, you know what? Big middle finger to the air. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm tough. I'm going to prove I'm tough. I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
So, but how do we at least give those people the information of like, here's what it is. So registry trials is that they're amazing. They have these, other countries are much better, like the Scandinavian countries, UK, they have the UK Biobank where whatever you tell your doctor, they record it. It goes into a central sort of station and it's anonymized. So you can't really tell, but you can say, listen, we've had 500,000 people in this biobank in the last year.
I mean, we should put that up on the blockchain. Like that seems like such a huge win.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But then you can say, hey, we've seen 10,000 people on peptides, copper tripeptide. Guess what? I don't know, 90% of them said it was useless. They stopped after 6 months, you know? Because that's the thing. Are you going to continue? We don't have dosing. I'm like, well, so when do you stop? Like, are you going to do it for 3 months and then you stop? And then is it all going to go away? Are you going to get worse? Is there going to be a rebound effect where you're worse? We have no idea. It's a black box. So like if people are doing it anyway, I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to follow you in my clinic, like no judgments, but like, I don't know, let's at least do something. Let's like measure. We have like high resolution cameras. You can probably see it behind me, evil, where we can sort of see, is there things are you building more collagen? Are you building more elastin, vascular? Like we have, this doesn't measure that, but there's other tools we can use, corneometers that can tell us what's happening. So if it is changing, great. But again, is it placebo? It's just an unknown box. And then I like to classify the other peptides that you mentioned. I'll dive into it briefly. So there's like the 14 to 19 that, RFK has talked about, like, let's just release them to the world and see there's low risk of sort of maybe human issues. They were before, category 1, they were moved to category 2. Now he's like, well, I mean, why are we putting them in the category 2? There's no signal that it's bad, so that's the thing. And then a lot of physicians will say like, well, it's bad. I'm like, okay, you're evidence-based. What's the data that it's bad? So we also don't have that. So we're in this weird Goldilocks zone where we just don't know. And there are some that I think, BPC 157, tons of data in mice. There's 200 papers. Have you heard of something called the LD50? Have your parents ever mentioned that?
No, LD50, no.
So it's a research term where it's a lethal dose, 50%. So if I give this dose to mice, it's measured in mice, 50% of the mice will die. Okay, so that's a standard measure of toxicity, right? So people sometimes also talk about Botox. They're like, oh, Botox has an LD50 in mice and you're given this toxin. I'm like, no. Listen, the toxin, the dose makes the toxin. Like in humans, we have like, it's literally the McDonald's of skincare. Like we have 1 billion patients served, and we're not seeing deaths if it's used from the right source. You will every once in a while see like, 10 people with Botox admitted to the hospital. I'm like, what? And I look, great. Guess what? Gray market Botox, right? Because it's research grade. So that's the issue is there's so many of these, Chinese factories where they're like, I went on Yanosec and I checked and it's all HPLC purity. I'm like, yeah, but one batch, what about the next batch? They're not CGMP certified. I don't know what's happening. But getting back to LD50, BPC 157, can you guess what it is for BPC 157?
I mean, I don't know the units and everything. So
it doesn't exist. They couldn't give enough. There's no dose so they tried, they couldn't do it. But that's mice. Mice, live in their own feces and stuff. So they have a different immune system, right? So that's why whenever they say, like a lot of influencers they'll say like, it's super fine in mice. They live 20% longer. I'm like, but mouse only lives 2 years. Like what happens at year 30? But we think things like BPC 157, we're like, it doesn't really, there's 3 studies now. I mean, same group, Dr. Edwin Lee published sort of like, some studies there, and it seemed safe. There was no side effects. Most of them sort of had maybe a little bit of an improvement. So we're like, okay, maybe this one, as long as your doctor tells you, and as long as you're followed, and they say, listen, this is an experiment. I have no clue what's happening, but if you're already doing it anyway, let's monitor and see what happens, right? So that's that. And then there's like, the other ones that sort of, the one I don't like is epitalin. People talk about it. It's a big popular one. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yeah.
They talk about longevity. The main thing is they talk about
extend the telomere.
Telomeres, yes. But telomeres are again like height. So it's me like telling you, hey, Andrew, how tall are you right now? I don't know. Let's say you say 6'1". I'm like, this will make you 6'3". I'm like, well, is that going to change my health? Like, what does it do? So telomeres are really only important if you're extra super short. So if you're in the middle and you increase it by like 10%, I'm like, it doesn't do anything. Like you're just, great. You feel better because you have a test now. But that test is like literally saying like you went from 6'1" to 6'3". Unless you're a basketball player, you're probably not going to care that much, right? So, that's the kind of the honest stance on the peptides. Like I'm all for, I hope they work, but we need a better system.
Yeah. We just don't know yet.
We don't know. And I hope we can all come together as a group that's interested in this and just say, let's create registries that are anonymized. So I don't know if you're taking it, I'm taking it, the FBI or whoever, FDA is not going to come after us, but we can actually start generating these safety and efficacy signals to see if it's actually working or not. That's what happened during COVID because we didn't know. There was like minute to minute. One day we're like, oh shoot, the newest data suggesting it's bad or it's good, it's bad. So we had to adjust on the fly. So I think if we can take that sort of approach of like, if people are doing it anyway, like I'm going to say, listen, there's no data, don't do it. But if you're doing it anyway, let's at least find a way to record this data safely, effectively, and anonymously so that people, can do it and not lie about it.
Yeah, I love that idea. I hope somebody listening to this does create something, gets with some Reddit groups, and we have a blockchain.
Yes.
Seems like it could be an interesting business there. What about so outside the peptide realm, other maybe less well-known NMN or rapamycin or senolytics? Like what are other things that you see when you talk about really taking care of not just surface level skin health?
Yeah, so I think we're very close to discovering true, real anti-aging stuff. And something, I mean, I look at LeBron James and I'm like, whatever he's on, ask him, like, once he publishes his memoirs, whatever he's taken, do that. Because, like, I mean, to be 41 and dunking like he's doing, that's like, honestly, that's unheard of, right?
Well, part of it's, I mean, he spends 8 hours a day recovering, right? Like, he treats recovery as a job as well. And so we know, like, with the glymphatic system, if you're not getting enough sleep, you are going to be inflamed. You are going to have puffiness. Like, so I think a lot of it isn't just what he's doing; it's what he's not doing, which is overtaxing.
And that's what I say. So we have our longevity. I mean, if your listeners, clients want this stuff, we can put, we have a longevity stack where we talk about, listen, this is actually validated based on sort of parameters. The true one we have is actually True Diagnostic I'm not affiliated with them. I don't have any, royalties if people get True Diagnostic, but it's a test where you can actually measure your epigenetic age, your Dundee pace, which is the pace of aging. So NMN does have some data. There's a product called Novos Labs specifically. They've actually tested it, MIT Harvard venture, where it's a multi-component thing. And really what you want to target is we call it the 12 hallmarks of aging. So proteostasis, zombie cells, cell-to-cell communication, stem cell exhaustion, 12 of them, okay? Inflammation, reactive oxygen species. So what I think is right now we're sort of taking the shotgun approach where we're sort of saying, well, let's just target all of them, right? The issue is always individual variability. Like for you, maybe you need out of those 12, maybe you need like number 12, number 3, and number 8. And I need like number 2, 7, and 9, to really optimize. So right now, it's also a bit of a crapshoot. Rapamycin, I think it has some really good data, but it's sort of the opposite. One of the big, peptide stacks that people talk about, tesamorelin, ipamorelin, CJC, right? What does it do? Like, do you know? I'm sure you've heard of it. Like,
stimulate the human growth hormone.
Yeah, and IGF-1, right? Guess what rapamycin does?
Stomps on IGF-1.
Exactly. mTOR inhibits it. So the exact opposite. So I'm like, so at the very least, like you might be like, the acid-base chemistry. You're like, oh, I'm taking an acid for this, and then I'm taking a base for that. And I'm like, at the end of it, you get some salty water. You're getting saline. You're literally getting saline. I'm like, you're literally placeboing. So I think that's the issue, is that we don't really know how these things interact. But I think, rapamycin does have potential. I was on it personally for a little while. I was tracking through it. Didn't really work for me. And then I was getting a little bit, one of the side effects is sort of you can get mouth sore. So personally, I was getting some of those. So I'm like, maybe not for me. Metformin has some maybe data. Again, it's all about that sugar processing. So I think, along that line, we're going to start probably, I'd love to see the newest data. And there is some newer data on GLP-1s, actually decreasing microdosing, but again, what does microdosing mean? It's going to be different for you, for me, right? For me, I'm one of there's actually newest data that there's these super responders that just like even a whiff, it puts them out. I was one of them, I was on tirzepatide, okay. Even 2.5. I had massive migraines for 3 days.
Wow.
So now I'm on like a third of the dose, so like 0.8 milligram, like, and that seems to be okay for me. And I'm seeing sort of the benefits. So it really is going to be patient to patient dependent.
And when you say the benefits, are you tracking, is it like fasting insulin? What are you looking to try to improve when you're doing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, one, body composition. I think that's number one. If you have extra fat, especially around the belly, that's number one thing that's going to be killing you. I think it's probably, to some extent, based on the studies, even worse than smoking. So, carrying too much weight around the midsection, especially having a fat, A1C level that's high, poor intake of food. So you need to make your micronutrients. So I'm like, unless you're doing all that, forget peptides, forget anything else, forget GLP-1s. You got to get that in order. Now, there are people, it's metabolic. It's like me saying, why are you wearing glasses? Just squint harder, Again, it comes to genetics. Some people, they just have this insatiable drive to eat. And that's where, you turn down that volume with a GLP-1 and you can really help them out. So that's kind of that. So I think GLP-1s are really starting to take over that whole like longevity. But again, we have to track it with something. What are we seeing? So fasting insulin. Are we decreasing homocysteine levels? Are we looking at like LDH? Because again, if you're fixing your diet, you're going to help your LDH. You're going to look at apolipoprotein, B and stuff. So those are going to be your best ones. And then ESR, HSCRP, like inflammatory markers.
C-reactive protein.
Yeah, C-reactive protein is going to be very key. So those are going to be the things you're going to do. And then again, you got to track it. It might not be able to sort of fix that specifically. To give you the best example, we do phase 1 through phase 4 research on a lot of autoimmune conditions like hidradenitis suppurativa, some of the highest CRPs out there. And even when we treat them with medications, it doesn't really come down. And we know these patients, if they're uncontrolled HS, they live 15 to 20 years less than people that don't have HS, right? Psoriasis, about 5 to 10 years less than people that don't have that inflammation. So really inflammation, metabolic patterns, we really have to improve on, and we have to really track it. The issue is like another thing that people say, like, well, how much does diet help? And this is the one thing, there is this movement where, oh, don't take any medications. I'm like, why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't we just...
Because social media is not good at nuance. I need a big headline that's going to get clicks. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm like, why am I picking between mom and dad? Exactly. What if I want a little bit of both? Like a little bit of medicine, maybe I can decrease the dose of medication that I'm on by doing the diet. So just giving you example of a diet. So they'd finally have that research and they're like, doctors never talk about diet. I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, every consult I say, see a dietitian. I'm not going to be the one to go through it. Just like exercise, I'll be like, go see Andrew, man. The guy swims 25 kilometers. Like, why am I talking to you about swimming? It's important. It's great on your joints. You're not gonna need well, maybe for shoulders, but go see Andrew. It's important. But let's talk about what I actually prescribe here. We're gonna spend the majority of the time. They have finally a look at the diet. So one of the best ones is intermittent fasting. So looking at that, there's different ways, that you can intermittent fast, right? So is it the 18-hour window? Is it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where you're only doing 600 calories, right? So many different ways to call it intermittent fasting. So that can help with psoriasis, but it's about equivalent to what we call methotrexate, where 35% of patients will get 75% or better.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. But back to that super responder group, right? You said 35%.
35% get pretty clear, okay? But with the best medication, something like Skyrizi, for example, or Bimzelx, or Brodalumab, we can get 90% of people getting over 90% better, right? So I'm like, so why are we missing out on that? And if you're not one of the 35, because the ones that respond, the super responders, they're going to be loud and say, look at me, I cured myself with just the food. I'm like, dude, you're just a super responder and you don't have bad genes. Why are we then shaming people that actually need the med? Yes, do both. Maybe if you do the food, it'll decrease it. So maybe you need a lower dose of the actual medication. That's always the goal.
Yeah. Dr. Sajic, there's so much in here, so much to unpack. I know we could go a lot longer. There's so many other topics, but I really appreciate your work and how deep you went with us today on so many of these topics. Thank you.
Hey, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. I mean, this is what it's about, spreading that message, getting people to understand the nuance that, yeah, maybe you can hook them for 3 seconds. I sometimes say outlandish things to hook them too. And I'm like, listen, go listen to my podcast for the full information,
Yeah, those that want to follow you, learn more, get more information about everything you're doing, where can they find you? And we'll make sure to put in the show notes.
The best thing is just my first name, last name, MD at Instagram. So we're there. We have if they want to see me in clinic, we have now clinics in Toronto, Brentwood, California, soon to open up one in West Palm Beach area as well. So if they want to in person. And then we also do virtual consultations as well if they feel they could benefit.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Sajic, I really appreciate you again coming on today, and enjoy a lively day.
Thank you, too.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.